Imagine being so poor that your last meal is already prepared. And you believe after eating it, you and your child will die. Now imagine a prophet of God walking up to you and asking you to give him that food instead. Why would God send his prophet to a starving widow? And why did the Bible say God had already commanded her, even though we never see him speaking to her? Hidden in this story is a powerful truth about how God works in our lives. The land of Israel was in the middle of a severe drought. The prophet Elijah had already declared that there would be no rain, and the famine was spreading everywhere. Food was scarce, water was disappearing. At first, God sustained Elijah by sending ravens to bring him bread and meat. But soon the brook dried up. And then God spoke again. "Arise, go to Zarephath. I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." But something interesting happens when Elijah arrives. When he meets the widow, she doesn't seem like someone who had received a divine command. Instead, she is gathering sticks. When Elijah asks her for water and bread, she replies with heartbreaking honesty, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks so that I may prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." This was a woman at the end of her hope. So the question is, if God had commanded her, why didn't she know? Sometimes God does not shout from heaven. Sometimes he places the command in our hearts. A strong conviction, a quiet pull, a feeling that we should do something even when it makes no logical sense. The widow may not have heard God's voice out loud, but something in her heart allowed her to obey the prophet when he spoke. And that obedience changed everything. Think about this moment. God sends a hungry prophet to a starving widow. If we were planning the miracle, we might send Elijah to a rich man, or a governor, or someone with plenty of food. But God chose a poor widow. Why? Because God was not only planning to feed Elijah, he was also planning to restore her and her house. Elijah tells her something that must have sounded impossible. "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you said, but first make me a small cake and bring it to me." Then he speaks a promise from God. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain upon the land. This was a moment of faith. The widow had a choice: hold on to the little she had, or trust God with it. And the Bible tells us something beautiful. She went and did according to the word of Elijah. And from that moment forward, the miracle began. The flour did not run out. The oil did not fail. Day after day, meal after meal, God provided. Two people who were both in need, a hungry prophet and a desperate widow, became part of a miracle that only God would create. Sometimes God brings two broken situations together to produce a miracle. Sometimes he sends provision in unexpected ways. The widow gave her last meal. But in return, God gave her a miracle that lasted through the famine. The jar of flour was not used up. and the jug of oil did not run dry. Maybe today you feel like that widow. You look at your life and all you see is limitation. But God sees something different. Just as He said in Revelation, "I know your works and your poverty." Yes, God saw the widow. Yes, He knew her situation. He knew she was down to her last meal. But something about the way God works is surprising to some. God doesn't always operate through pity. He operates through purpose, through faith, through trust. The Bible says that God had already commanded the widow to provide for Elijah. But when we read the story, there's no scene where God speaks to her directly. But as I said earlier, sometimes God places a command in your heart, not always as a loud voice, but as a strong feeling, a deep knowing, a quiet nudge you can't ignore. Something inside you that says, "Do this," even when it doesn't make logical sense. So when Elijah asked her to give, it wasn't just a random request. It was a moment that revealed what was already happening inside her heart. And this is where it speaks to us. Because when we're going through hard times, it's natural to want God to respond with immediate relief. We want Him to see our pain and fix it right away. But sometimes, instead of removing the struggle instantly, God asks for something deeper. He asks for trust. Not after things get better, but right in the middle of the difficulty, and that can feel confusing. God, don't you see what I'm going through? Don't you see how hard this is? And now, you're asking me to step out in faith? But that's exactly the point. Faith isn't proven when life is easy. It's revealed when life is uncertain. The widow could have said no. She could have held on to what little she had and focused only on her survival. But instead, she responded to that moment, whether it came as a command, a conviction, or a quiet stirring, and she chose to act. Not because it was comfortable, not because it made perfect sense, but because somewhere inside she trusted. And maybe that's what someone needs to hear today. Don't just look at your situation and wait for God to move out of pity. Recognize that if God is prompting you, if there's something He is placing on your heart, even in the middle of your struggle, there's purpose in it. That step of obedience, that act of faith, that decision to trust, it matters because it shows that your faith isn't based only on what you see. It shows that you truly believe, even when everything around you says otherwise. God sees you. God knows your situation, and He is ready to help. And sometimes the miracle begins the moment we trust Him with the little we have. The God who sustained the widow of Zarephath is still able to provide today